let's dive into the site administration itself. And note that this is going to be specific for the site or the subsite you're looking for, with a couple of exceptions. The first is the first thing we're going to be looking at, which is the permissions and user groups. This is because we actually set our subsite up as to inherit permissions. Now, if you set it up for unique permissions, you would need to do this task on each of the subsites, and they would not flow down. So a part of what you do with permissions is making sure that you understand where that goes, where your unique permissions are, and where your inheritance is. So let's start off with looking at the people and groups, because this is what we're going to be assigning to. Right now, I just have a simple demo site that has my administrator account. So you can actually see that that's under the owner. We've got our administrator, but let's take a look at the site, at the groups themselves. So you can see that we've got a everyone group, which is literally that. It's everyone that's on the site and has pretty limited permissions. It's kind of a special case deal. We've got our Excel services viewers, and this is available and added by default because we have some of those Excel reports that we want to look at. It's basically to allow your users to be able to see what's going on, see those reports and pop it up. And you could say it's only view the document using the server rendering. This means they can't download it. They can just look at what's on the site itself. The team site members, these are your users that come in and use the site every day. They have edit permissions that we'll talk about. The owners are the administrator and yourself, and how all the people have permissions to actually grant permissions and all the rest of it. And then the visitors are people who come in. They can just read. They can't change anything, so they're coming in to have access to that. Let's go in and take a look at the information for the group itself. So this is the owner. You see we've got a little bit of information that's got the about me. I highly recommend you fill this out completely. Note that this has a link to where it's scoped to. This is by default. If you do additional groups, I recommend you copy this link and put it in there so you can actually see where the scope is. It points you back to where this group has relevance to. Who's the owner? This is the owners can own the owner group, so this means that anyone in that owner group is counted as an owner for this group. We've got our who can view the membership, so everyone right now can see who's in the owners group. This is you generally want this because that way they know who to come to and who to talk to about things that they need changed. And who can edit the membership? Just the group owner. We don't want to let members come in and add other owners. So just the original owner of the site can add other owners. You can put in and say any members if you had maybe multiple owners that you wanted to go through and manage it. But this with permissions, you want to keep things locked down about as much as you can because that helps things out. You don't want a lot of new members popping up very quickly, and you want to make sure everything's coordinated. You can allow requests to join or leave the group. This means that if someone wanted to become, for example, this is an owner group, wanted to become an owner, they could request it, and then you could allow or deny it. If you do allow requests, then you actually need to put an email that'll send the notification. And then if you actually had something like a visitor, they wanted to automatically become part of the visitor group, you could just auto accept their request. It would send you an email to let you know that was coming in and would automatically let them get to that level. That's, if you're doing an information distribution, that visitor lets them be authenticated rather than doing anonymous, but it doesn't let them do anything. So this is one of those pieces where it's going to be specific to your situation, but it's probably you're not going to do a lot of this, but there are situations where you really want to kind of dig into it. And then what we can actually do here is take a look at the permissions. And we can see that here's the URL that's there. And because this is the team site members we're looking at this point, we've got a permission level of edit. That means that they have read-write permissions into the site. It's a fairly simplistic way of looking at it, and we're going to dive into how you can actually customize that permission level. And then let's go in and take a look at that. Then you can actually, for this whole view, just as a side note, as we go through all these settings, this list setting says that you can actually go through and change how your groups look. So you can actually go through and say this is a You can actually put new columns on this. Just like any other list in SharePoint, even the administration list can be customized to a high degree. So you can actually go through and do a lot of those kind of things. So I thought I'd mention that as we're here. Let's pop back to our settings and look at the permissions. And you can see that we've got a warning. Some content on the site is different permissions from what you see here. This is basically telling us that there's something that's not the same. And I'll go ahead and tell you what it is. It's actually the microfeed site. It's actually opened up it's opened up so that more people can get access to it. So you can go in there and see what's going on, see where there is unique permissions, and be able to take a look at that. But right now, let's actually look and see. We've got our team site members. It shows edit, but let's see what that actually means. That means that we got full control. We've got design, which is a higher level than edit, which means that they can go in and change and customize things and do a lot of things on the site. So if you got someone who's really good at your user experience, or you want to give higher access but not full control, you give them design. We got edit, can basically work with the list items, but not really work with the style sheets and the rest of that. Note that this does allow them to edit and delete lists, so it's a pretty high level of permissions. Contribute just lets them work with the content in those lists. So this is, if you gave them contribute, not edit, then they'd be able to go through and add files or add items and delete items in the list, but the lists themselves would be off limits for them. Read can view the pages and list items and download documents. Basically, and then view only is they can actually go through and do what read says, but they can only view things in the web browser. It will not download files. They can load it in basically in the Excel viewer or the Word viewer or whatever, but they cannot drop things back down to the desktop. So it's a little bit of a way to minimize access to it. Now, note that just because they can't pull it down doesn't mean they can't copy that content out. If you got a Word document, it's something that they can copy the HTML, but it does kind of put a speed bump in the way of just grabbing everything and downloading the whole thing. So that's our permissions for our team site members. The edit, I might put that down to contribute depending on how I want to do things, but I can go through and take a look at that, and then I can actually take a look at the permission levels. And you can see that we've got those levels that we've got. Let's look at our edit again. And you can see that now this is another setting that we can go through. We've got the description, but we can actually see what it's allowing us to do. Manage lists, override list behaviors, can't do that. We can't go through and discard or check out a document, which check out to the user. Basically, can't break a lock. They can add, edit, delete. They cannot approve minor items. If we've got a approval set, they don't have that permission. And then you can actually see the site permissions that they don't have. I highly recommend you actually go through and take a look at all of these to see what you actually can and cannot allow. There's a lot of different permissions in here, and you can actually go through. You can copy this permission level and put it to another site if you want to start with this. But it's one of those pieces of you can go through and make things very different. You add a permission level and change all of those around. You can see that we've got limited access. We've got these that we actually aren't able to customize. So let's go back, pop back a couple of stuff. And then you can see as we're working with this, we can remove user permissions, add user permissions. We can actually add another group and then put those permission levels on it. We can also check the permissions, so we can actually see what user or group, and then see what the what their effective permissions are, which is very, very useful. See, go in, this is my administration account, and I've got full control. So if I'm actually part of multiple groups, this will give me a resolution on what permissions I actually have, which is something you're going to be very happy that you've got the ability to do. So there's your permissions. Remember, these drop back down. Those will go into the sub-site as well, so you've actually got that capability. We've got the site collection administrators. That's one thing to mention. Because there are two different levels, there is the owner, the site collection administrators, and the owners. The administrator does have a higher permission than the owner. This one or more persons have the full control over the site. They do all kinds of stuff. They get default emails. They get all the notifications. And you see I only have one here because I'm actually working on my little development box. But you normally highly recommend you actually have two site collection administrators at any time, just because you want somebody to have those permissions. And if someone rolls off the project or leaves or whatever, you want to be able to have that. But remember, site collection administrators are a little bit higher permission than even owners. So just to be aware of that. And then we'll go into the site app permissions. And again, this is showing you that SharePoint has permissions. Here's the identifier. If you have, just like on the site collection administration, if you have additional apps that are authorized on here, you can actually see what they are, and you can actually go through and review what you need and remove them if you need to. Now we'll look at the Web Designer galleries. These are for those designer roles that we were talking about. This lets you have a lot of kind of commonality between how your sites are used. First, let's look at the site columns, and you'll see that basically we've got some various site columns that can be used. These are, when we look at the customizing the lists, basically you can add in different types of columns. These are ways to actually go through and create those predefined columns. Things like the URL that's got the hyperlink, or the workflow name to be able to drop into there, and to be able to let your power users or your standard members go in and modify things very easily. Things such as address, or your business phone. You can actually just see kind of the list down through here. These are default pieces. These are things that may be set up to tie into your Active Directory. There's some ways to, like manager's name, being able to pull that back out. So there are a lot of columns that you can use here. Previously in SharePoint in the early days, you kind of had to go through and do each of one of these individually or set them up. With your site columns, you can actually go through and just have common terms and common formats for everything. Makes it very easy to go to get everybody on the same page. Then there are the site content types. You can actually go through, and again, this is going to be something that's pretty quick. We're going to, there's probably should be a course specifically for designers, because it's a pretty unique skill set. But you can actually go through here and see that you've got things such as audio, video, rich media asset, which is a document. You can actually see how things are put into place, what the parents are. You can actually put hierarchies on these, so you can actually see exactly what you're doing. So as your content comes into play, you know what's going on, you know exactly how you can drop it in. And again, you know the source. These are all coming from TeamSite itself. If you wanted to pull it in for someplace else, or if you had a sub-site that was pulling from your parent level site, then you'd know exactly where it was. Go in and just do a quick little create, just so you can see the details. Pulling parent content. These are all things kind of out of the box that you've got in place. The parent content type here, because we got business intelligence, if we changed it to community content types, we'd actually have different pieces. So you actually come into place, and now you can actually go forth and use it. So you can actually drop it into place, put it all in there as well. At the top level, you can actually publish the content type, so you can actually have these coming from different areas. But as a site owner, you're probably just going to be more concerned with taking what's been published in your SharePoint farm and pulling it into here. Web parts. Web parts have been kind of the core of SharePoint UI for forever. This is actually giving you the ability to go through and look at what web parts are in there. Web parts, they've evolved over the years, and right now they tend to be pretty much just JavaScript based. They can have a lot of functionality in them, so you need to be aware of that, but you need to just know what's available on your site itself. So things like blog archives. You can see that you can actually go through and see the dashboard, my site, middle right, middle. You can see all the details that they give you there, weather defaults, and you can go on and on. There's a lot of web parts, but this can actually go through and let you know what's available, what you've got, and if you've got some custom deployed, they'll show up here as well, and you can go through and find those. There are the list templates. We don't have any custom list templates. I'll jump into that after we do the finish up this site administration tasks. We'll go into the list templates, but just so you know, as we do those custom ones, we'll come back here and you can see what list templates you have, or you can upload them from other locations. Master pages. Master pages are basically what you see here. As we move around, you see we always keep our navigation and we always keep our top bar. We keep our information across the top here. That's our master page that's doing that. You can actually see you've got minimal masters, you've got Oslo, you've got various different ways of doing this. So you can actually go through and change how the site itself looks with the master page very easily and put that across there. Just know that when we look at the SharePoint Designer, this is kind of where we look at the master pages. And again, your designers are probably going to be looking at that. Themes. If you got multiple themes in here, this is SharePoint 2013, which is 15. And you've got your palettes. These are all your style sheets that you've got in place, your fonts. Again, if your designer is going through there and changing it around, otherwise you can actually pick up some themes on the SharePoint Marketplace, or just there are different designers that provide those. SharePoint has the concept of solutions. You can actually see what we got here. You can actually see there's nothing in the solution gallery, and you can also see what's being used by those solutions. So we don't have anything in place, so we're not burning up server resources. If we had different things in place, maybe things that ran on a schedule or whatever, this would tell us how many resources we've got. This is something that happens at the farm level, that your farm administrators can make sure that you don't basically soak up all the resources on the servers themselves. So just know that if you are deploying those, again, this is where you would upload a solution, or you would activate or deactivate it or upgrade it. This is something that normally happens at the higher level, but you can actually go through and see what you've got here. And then the library itself, you can actually do all the standard changes. And then composed looks are something new. This is actually going in, and you can see this is not just a master page or a theme, but the two together. And you can see what we're looking at here for the theme URL, what's going on in the master page, how those are tied together, any image URLs in here, excuse me while I spin over, and the font scheme. So this is basically, those composed looks are working with a custom master page, working with a theme, working with your images and your logos, and working with your fonts as well. So you can actually go through, and this is where you would generally want to change what's going on with how your SharePoint looks and feels, because this is really a nice little tool to put it all together. And that's a quick look at the web designer galleries. Again, this is kind of useful for you to kind of look at it and make things common, but normally you would have somebody with the specific skill sets to go in that knows style sheets, that knows master pages, that knows ASP.NET and how to put it all in place, and possibly quite a bit of JavaScript to really do that customization. Most site owners don't dig that deep into it. Most of the content you'll get here will come from someplace else, and you'll just manage it being deployed. So it makes it a little bit easier on that side. Now let's look at the site administration tasks. First off, we'll take a look at the regional settings. These basically let you know what time it is and your languages and all the rest of it. This is actually something that's pretty useful, especially if you have international SharePoint implementations. You can actually set the time zone for this site, and I'll actually go through and change it to Central Time, which is mine. We can actually do the locale. This lets you do some pretty interesting things with the languages itself. You can actually see that we can go Canadian or Philippines or UK English or lots of other things. This actually helps search figure out what you're doing, actually does some spelling modifications and the rest as you're going through it. So fairly useful. Sort order. General is just works with pretty much anything, or you can go very specific. This is basically when you do sorts on ascending or descending, that you can actually see, A, B, C, or how it all goes into place. So General tries to do the best it can with whatever there is. If you've got something that you know you're going to be very specific on, you can choose that. You note that you can actually change your calendar. This is one of those pieces where, if you don't need it, it's kind of interesting, but just the fact that you can actually go through and change it to whatever you want to on your calendars and actually be able to pull it back in and work with whatever locale is there. So pretty interesting, pretty useful. Again, if you're doing multiple locations, and again, you can actually do an alternative calendar. You can actually go through, it'll keep the dates in sync, but it'll actually be able to format it in different ways. So we can actually do a Arabic calendar as a secondary. You can actually show the week numbers as well in Date Navigator. It's kind of useful to be able to figure out where you are in the year. You can define the work week. This is something that you can actually do in Outlook or some other places, but you can actually go through and say, what's the work week? Is this a 24/7? Is this a 2-shift, 5 days, 2-shift, 6-day, whatever? And be able to go into place. And then you can actually go through and say, do we want a 24-hour or 12-hour time? Makes it kind of interesting to go back and put it all in place. Then you can actually go through and see your site libraries and lists. You can actually see these are the ones we actually have on the site itself, and then you can go directly to customizing it. So it's a nice way to kind of jump in and just see an overview and tweak it pretty easy. Again, I'm going to come back to this in the next section for customizing the lists and libraries. User alerts. What we can actually do is go in and review the user alerts. Again, there are no alerts set up for any users, but we'd be able to drop it down and take a look and see. If you're not familiar with user alerts, take a look at the SharePoint user course. But basically, this is where that users can say, SharePoint notify me. It's a push notification that may go through email. It may go through the SharePoint internal messaging system. It may go through unified communications, but it can just say, watch this, whatever, and let me know when something changes. Maybe a list, maybe a document, maybe an item, maybe a person. But what happens is these can actually get pretty resource hungry, especially if there's a lot of alerts set, or there's high activity on what their alerts are set up for, or they've got one of the options for alerts is notify immediately, which can take a lot of CPU cycle and resources. So this is where you can actually go through, see what the alerts are set up with, and remove them if a user is taking an inordinate amount of resources. RSS. SharePoint allows RSS on most things. The lists are set up to provide RSS feeds, and you can actually have views on the RSS as well. I always recommend allowing RSS feeds, mainly because it's just so useful for the site collection and for the site. Basically what happens is you can use RSS, you can have your users use RSS as actually a poor man's web service. This is a way to actually get formatted data out of SharePoint very easily, and you can actually tie it into a bunch of different things. I've gone to the extreme of actually using this for, there's a integration website called If This Then That. You can actually use RSS feeds to tie information back and forth through all of that kind of stuff. So pretty useful, pretty interesting. What you can actually do though is you can set your copyright, your editor, and your webmaster. So you can actually go in place. And the time to live just means how much are you caching in there. So again, recommend that you put this on. We go to the list and go a little bit deeper into customization, and I'll show you kind of some of the useful pieces there. Sites and workspaces are specifically for your subsites. Just as a note, the document workspaces and meeting workspaces are a bit historic. I don't know a lot of people that do these anymore. Meeting workspaces are kind of nice because you get an instance for each meeting. The problem is that bubbling up the information becomes a little bit more of a challenge. You actually have to kind of dig down in it. So most people kind of run their meetings off of a list on their main SharePoint site. The document workspaces were built for basically pushing down a document for intensive work that may be beyond the scope of the workflow in the main site. Again, these days most people actually just fit it into their main site and put it in place, or put a sub project as I've done here to drop it in. So just so you know how that all fits, but you can actually go in, you can actually do your create, and you can actually, site creation permissions are nice that you can actually go in and say who can actually create sites and workspaces on here. Design, edit, and contribute can, so that makes a lot of sense. We've got our workflow settings, and right now we don't have any workflows in progress. When we go to the documents library updates, we'll put that in place and show you the different types of workflows out of the box, but then you can also create your own, and I'll show you quickly how to do that in the SharePoint Designer section. And the site closures and deletions. This is what we're talking about with, we were talking about earlier with being, how do you set the policy? How do you actually set things to close or put in place? We don't have any site policies on here. This site will be deleted never because we haven't set that policy. And we can actually say what's going on with all the rest of it and to put in with projects. So simple just to review what's going on, and so you can see what's happening here. Again, this is something that probably you'll want to coordinate with your server farm administrators. Popularity trends actually can show you what's going on in your site, what's being most visited, read, updated, all the rest of it. It's a very nice little report. Again, this is a dev site, so I can open it up and it would show you that really there's not a lot going on. You just see me clicking around, but this is one of the reports that you really want to pull pretty frequently. This gives you a lot of insight into what your users are doing, what your members are what's happening on your site. And again, it can show you how to update your site and make it more usable, and it also can show you when maybe some things are happening that you really didn't expect or want. And then we've got our term store management. This is actually able to go into your metadata. This is one of those pieces I'm just opening up so you get to see it. This is one of the areas where you're probably going to want to have somebody doing your information architecture. I'll mention just a little bit about that later, but in general, this is actually managed from your server farm again. And you can actually import information, do different languages, actually do different terms. There's a bunch of different things this can do to help you with things like synonyms. You know, we use this term, it's commonly used as something else. This is how we actually map from one to the other. This is where we may want to do a item that's a special term for us that may not make sense outside of it. So just be aware that that's in there. It's one of those pieces that if you need it, you'll probably need to go looking for it, but I just want to make sure you knew that it's there, and it would probably take a little bit more digging in to really do a lot with it. Search. We kind of went through search on the site collection administration, so I'm not going to go into this too deeply, but we can actually go through. You got the result sources, your result types, the query rules. Query rules I'll mention in just a minute. And basically we can actually do the for documents, we want to do a rule here and actually test a query and see what comes into place. We can actually put in results and make sure that you can actually do things in place to promote things. So if you're in documents and you're looking for policies, maybe shouldn't be here, and you see that search and you pop it up and say, hey, also give them a link to this different direction, or put some different pieces in there. So really useful, really kind of beneficial to helping people find what they're looking for. Schemas need to be, when you're crawling something externally, you probably want to pick that up. If you're just working with the SharePoint lists and libraries, all of that metadata is going to come in correctly and you don't need to really worry about it. I'll go into search settings just for a moment, just so you can see if your SharePoint site has a overview search area. You can actually put a search center so that you can go in and not have search just being focused on your site or what you've put into place. Again, we're actually working with just a SharePoint site at this point, but you can actually have a lot of customizations with SharePoint search. Since SharePoint integrated fast a couple generations back, it's been the options that you have for search are really amazing. But again, this is one of those pieces where having somebody that's a specialist on search is probably going to help you out, or coordinating with your SharePoint farm admins. Basically, offline abilities, should they show up, and how they handle advanced capabilities. Basically, what you're doing here is letting it search the site appear in search results. Yes, I do want to do that so that I can actually hide my site from the search engine if I wanted to, if this was maybe a secure piece. Do not index web parts if the site contains fine-grained permissions. The reason for that is that the web parts themselves may expose data that you don't want, especially if there's different levels. And basically, if the search account can see something that someone shouldn't, then you really don't want it to show up. So generally leave that one alone and allow the items from this site to be downloaded offline clients. This is one of those pieces that I'm not, it probably shouldn't be in this area, but it's kind of useful to know where it is. This is where you can actually say, yes, you can download like the files or items there. You can actually sync with Excel and all those kind of things. This is basically your Office 365 integration, or your Office integration. I say Office 365 because that's where it's going. So anyway, the simple pieces for your search and your configuration, import, and export. This is where after you tweak all of these things, you can actually export it. When you come into a new site, you can actually pull it into place and make it work fairly easy. For a quick rundown, now we've got the look and feel. We're just going to kind of touch on this very quickly. You can actually see it's team site, and if I wanted to, I'd go in and change it because it's more appropriate here. I can actually go in and give it a logo from my computer or from SharePoint. Those asset libraries are where these can pop up into place here, and a description as an alternate text for the picture. If you've got things that are readers or whatever, drop it into place. Again, super simple to go in and modify things. Now we can actually pop it up there, and away we go. Quick launch, if you'll notice, that's what we're looking at over here. This is another way to kind of drop in. I can actually put the new headings in place. I can change the orders. Again, this is all just simply what I can do with the edit links over on the side as well. And again, for the same, my team site, my sub project, same as going across the edit links across the top. Just kind of if you're in the settings, you can do it in there as well. You can actually set it up to do with the quick launch and actually change it to a tree view if you choose to. This allows everything to kind of roll up. If you've got a lot of information in the quick launch, it can make things a little easier to get to. So you can actually go in and see all the different details here. So your style library, because I'm owner, I can actually go through and see what's in the microfeeds. I can see what's in the style library, the media player, all the different pieces in place. So this gives me a lot more visibility into that site content if I want the tree view. Again, we've still got our main view up here. We could hide that if we wanted to, but this kind of gives us all the details that we're looking for. And then we were talking about the composited look. We've got a current here. We can actually go in and say, let's do a green. We can actually change, remove, do what we want to, try it out. It'll take just a second to put it into place. Note that we've got a preview here that you can see what your site's going to look like before it goes into place. And this is a live preview because we've got our tree view here. And let's go ahead. Let's say that's not really what I want to do. Let's go back. So you can actually go through and do lots of tests. Note that there are quite a few different pieces already in place here, but you can actually go through and either customize your own or pick up other views inside, other composited views, composited looks inside the SharePoint store. So now let's finish up the site actions. Manage site features. This is the exact same thing we did with the site collection. You can just scope those features to specific sites at this point. So if we wanted to allow Business Intelligence Center data connections for just this site, we can activate it here, and it wouldn't be showing up other places. It'd just be where I want it to be. So you can actually go through and be very specific on where those site features are, activate them where they're needed to be, and have them turned off where you don't need them. This is one of the big ones. So we've gone through here and we've tweaked and we've done different looks and all the rest of it. We can actually go through and save our site as a template. Once we get everything in place, we can do this, and I'll go ahead and make a template right here. Note that you would probably want to wait until after you got all your lists done to do the save as a template, but since we're at this point, we'll do it. It will be a file name, my site template. Put my spaces in here. And here's one of the fun pieces, include content. Include content is incredibly powerful. What you actually want to do is go through and include content when you need it, and especially if you've got a site that you kind of set up clean, and you may want to put additional tasks. You may want to put promoted links in that get people started. This is all how you got that information when we put in the out-of-the-box templates. We created a site up for those, and you notice we had some information already in there. This is how you can do that yourself. It is just as simple as putting in what you're looking for and what you want to show up, and away it goes. Again, note the caution. Security is not maintained in it. Don't put private information in there. Just put it for public. This is mainly because if you give this template to someone else, it's going to be their content. So you drop it in there, put it to the right group, but you can't guarantee who's going to be in those security groups. So go ahead and click OK here. It'll take just a second as it puts the template. This is a pretty simple one. And we will basically have our template that we can use either to create another site under here or create templates somewhere else. You can actually see the template goes into the solution gallery. And now we've got our template that I was mentioning, that we've got new solutions. There it is. You can actually see what's going on. It's activated. It's using no resources, so we can actually see exactly where we're at. This is actually able to let people export the search configurations. We've enabled that so that search configuration export, you can actually drop that out. The most important thing on this page is reset to site definition. When everything goes wrong, when something breaks, when somebody's playing with SharePoint Designer and messes it up and your page isn't rendering or something's really messed up, reset to site definition is your savior. You can go through there and reset it. It will undo any changes you've made since you created the site and push it back to that template. Now, that being said, this could cause data loss. You could lose your work. But it's actually a lot better to kind of lose the work that's causing problems than it is to lose the entire site and have to figure out how you're going to recreate it. So this basically goes through if you've changed anything since you've actually created it from the template. This puts you right back to where you were. Note that is for the displays. It's not for the content in the list. This is just trying to get you back to where you can render the page again and put it into place. So this doesn't do this won't cause you problems with your content itself, just how the site itself appears and what you've actually put into place. And then finally, we've got delete the site. Go through, delete the site, remove it. Note that it does delete the site here. The farm administrators can recover things, but know that you really don't want to depend upon that. So be very, very sure what you're doing when you click on this.